Good evening from New York. This is Wednesday, October 12th, 391 days until the 2012 presidential election. Occupy Wall Street staging a mini version today of yesterday's Millionaires March. This one aimed solely at J.P. Morgan Chase CEO and Chairman Jamie Dimon. There were arrests, reportedly for wearing masks, because of all those roving gangs of masked bank robbers. The fifth story on the countdown. Unexpectedly, the protesters got the attention of a different billionaire tonight. New York Mayor Mike Bloomberg showed up, parading through Zuccotti Park and saying, quote, "People have a right to say what they want to say. Nobody is a better defender of the First Amendment than I am." Occupying Wall Street tweeting, Mayor Mike Bloomberg just showed up at Liberty Plaza, reception peaceful but not too inviting. The billionaire mayor spending between 5 and 10 minutes there, shaking hands during a glorified media-heavy photo op and eschewing both questions from and extra security offered to him by the protesters. The mayor was serenaded with cascading cries of "You are the 1%. He told protesters they'll have to leave in stages so the park can be cleaned on Friday. Zuccotti Park owner Brookfield Properties concerned its condition made it unfit for public use. Occupy Wall Street will reportedly be allowed to return so long as protesters follow the owner's rules. If they don't, arrests are presumably possible, as in San Francisco today, where some 200 activists rallied in front of Wells Fargo's corporate headquarters. For anybody wondering why the Occupy movement continues to grow, the latest Gallup poll should tell you everything you need to know. America now falling behind China in its share of people who say they could not afford to feed themselves or their families in the past year. Here's the Wednesday roundup. Occupy San Francisco launching this foreclose the banks protest outside that Wells Fargo today, demanding an ending to predatory lending and for respect for the human right to housing. At least 11 arrests as protesters attempted to block the building's entrance. City Supervisor John Avalos was there and addressed the crowd. He'll address us shortly. In New York's financial district, hundreds joined the march to J.P. Morgan Chase, some reportedly arrested for violating a 46-year-old law that prevents the masked gathering of 2 or more people unless they're throwing a masquerade party. I wish I were making that up. Prosperity, a masquerade at best for many Americans. That Gallup poll showing a frightening decline in many people's ability to provide for themselves and their families, especially compared to our alleged chief foreign rival, China. In 2008, 16% of the Chinese said there had been times over the previous year when they had lacked money for food. That year, 9% of Americans said the same thing. This year, the numbers have been reversed. Just 6% in China said there were times they or their families could not afford to eat. The number of Americans who couldn't always buy a meal grew to 19%. Affordable shelter, also a growing problem here and a declining problem there. 16% of the Chinese saying they had trouble affording a roof. That's down 5 points from 2008 compared to 11% of Americans unable to pay for housing in the past year. It's up 6 points from 2008 here. With numbers like those, some Wall Street moguls conceding Occupy Wall Street might have a point. The Citigroup CEO Vikram Pandit told Fortune magazine their sentiments are completely understandable. Trust has been broken between financial institutions and citizens of the U.S. And Bill Gross, co-founder of the Pacific Investment Management Company, tweeting, "Class warfare by the 99%? Of course. They're fighting back after 30 years of being shot at." Occupy Wall Street taking a shot at the banks with this. It's a flyer for a march on Saturday urging Chase Bank customers to close their accounts there. Other Occupy movements also asking supporters to take their money out of the other big corporate banks and deposit it in smaller community institutions instead. Following up on yesterday's morning arrests of Occupy Boston protesters, police now say 141 marchers there were arrested in what is being called the largest mass detention in recent memory in the city, arrested for refusing to move from the Rose Kennedy Greenway, with one protester, Iraq War veteran Rachel McNeil, dragged off by the throat by police. McNeil tweeting later, "It was me and it happened and I'm okay. I support the majority of Boston police I encountered during detention who do support us. This action has only made Occupy Boston stronger." Boston police insist their response was proportionate and that no Occupy demonstrators were hurt. Meanwhile, Occupy movements are now starting overseas. Korean activists planning to launch Occupy Seoul this Saturday with a 2-day sit-in across the capital. And Lech Walesa, the one-time dockyard worker, the Polish president, Nobel Prize winner, whose solidarity movement did more than any other group in the world to help defeat the Soviet Union and bring it toppling down, no matter what other crap you hear about Reagan, says he is coming to New York to support Occupy Wall Street. He told a Polish newspaper, "How could I not respond? The Wall Street protesters have focused a magnifying glass on the problem." For more on today's protest and arrest in San Francisco, I'm joined by City Supervisor John Avalos. Mr. Supervisor, thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Keith.
Do you consider yourself part of the Occupy movement? And whether you do or you don't, what are you hoping it's going to achieve?
Well, I've spoken a couple times at the Occupy movement. I think the movement largely exists without my participation, but I have been asked to come out and speak, and I support it.
What issues are driving the movement in San Francisco in particular?
Well, I could speak from my district that I represent in San Francisco, is that we have a large number of foreclosures, a high level of unemployment, higher than other parts of San Francisco, and people are feeling very desperate, having a difficult time paying the mortgage, having a difficult time paying rent, putting food on the table, and there's a feeling that the banks who got bailed out have not done enough to support the local economy and to support households against foreclosures and defaults.
What's the expected response from those banks? Do you think that viewing this from having 2 feet firmly in the political spectrum of the city, and yet being sympathetic and empathetic with the Occupy movement, do you think they can actually make things change?
You know, well, they were given a bailout. Bank of America was given about $273 billion, and with that, I hear now they're downsizing or firing about 30,000 workers countrywide. I don't really feel that they're in the ability to move right now to support working people, and sometimes I think it's best that we look at banking elsewhere. As a supervisor, I'm looking at creating our own municipal bank, pulling our money out of big banks like Wells Fargo and Bank of America, so we can actually control how we are investing in local businesses and small property owners.
What's the interaction been between the protesters and the police and the city to this point?
It's been, I would say, fairly calm. Today there was a march down in the financial district of the city, and the police were helping to make sure that the marchers were safe from traffic, and it was respectful. There was civil disobedience today, and people had blocked the doorways at Wells Fargo. It was done peacefully, and I believe there were 11 arrests that were made today, but that was something that was intentional.
You're running for mayor of San Francisco. Have your political aspirations hurt your credibility either with Occupy San Francisco or has it worked the other way? Do you know?
I really don't know. With Occupy San Francisco, I spoke today, and everyone was like cheering and very happy and congratulated me on my speech, basically saying that when we don't get what we need from our financial institutions, that we need to recreate them. And that was the spirit of why people were gathering today, and I think that message resonated with them. And then with the voters, the people I'm working for and who are supporting me are working class and middle class people, and they're the 99%. So they're actually with me as well.
John Avalos, San Francisco City Supervisor and a presence at the Occupy San Francisco protest. Great thanks for some of your time tonight, sir.
Thank you.
For more perspective on Occupy as the movement goes forward, a pleasure to be joined now by Tom Hayden, civil rights and anti-war activist, member of the California State Legislature for 18 years, founder of the 60s radical group Students for a Democratic Society. That's a great pleasure to talk to you, sir. Thanks for being on.
Keith, nice to talk to you. Thank you.
You were a freedom rider in the rural South as that began, and you were a community organizer in Newark as the country woke up in the early 60s, and you helped focus the rallies against the Vietnam War. Give me a historical perspective. Where does Occupy stand in terms of its start? I mean, 26 days in. Compare it to where any of those other movements were 26 days in.
I think it's difficult. I think this movement needs breathing room. It's just materializing, and it could go in any direction. The sit-ins started February 1st, 1960, and spread to 100 cities, 70,000 arrests. Free speech movement started over an incident about literature on a table at Sproul Hall. Nobody expected it. So the future seems to arrive unexpectedly, and there's a danger of trying to over-interpret what's about to happen, but something is definitely happening.
Have you got an idea of what the tipping point was on whatever it is that's happening? Was it Scott Walker and the union-busting efforts in Wisconsin? Was it something part of the movement itself, the arrests, perhaps the 700 arrests at Brooklyn Bridge? What changed this? Because wherever it's going, After the first week or 10 days, it looked like, well, that was interesting and very dramatic, and now it's going to go away. And it's obvious now, the reports are 1,100 American communities, 1,100 have some form of this. What made it jump to the right side of the river, if you will?
Well, I think there's, first of all, 2 or 3 years of increasing desperation in terms of foreclosures, unemployment, job insecurity, young people feeling that their future jobs have already been outsourced. That combined with, like the early New Deal, nothing happened for a couple of years, and then people started to go on strike. Nothing has been happening, and I think the protesters are completely correct that Washington is impossible. I think the possibilities at local levels, like Los Angeles or San Francisco, a municipal bank, some of these reforms are possible. There's to me 3 or 4 scenarios, because this can't last. One scenario is that it keeps growing as it has, unpredictably, with no end in sight. 2 is somebody orders the police to crack down. I'm glad Mayor Bloomberg seems to be listening to the advice of his girlfriend, who's on the board of that Zuccotti Park Neighborhood Association. 3, it escalates to civil disobedience and arrests, nonviolent, peaceful arrests, on a scale never known before. Probably in my lifetime, it would have to be 20,000 to 100,000.
Wow.
And imagine, though, Keith, if 10 or 20,000 people peacefully sat down in the streets in New York and said, if you don't do anything about Wall Street, arrest us.
Right.
And by the way, we're going to demand jury trials of our peers. The whole system would break down, and the message would not be lost. Or a final scenario, of course, it's always possible. At the last minute, the president could sense an emergency that requires action and do some things that he has not done before, things that he alone can do that are don't require the Senate or the House or the dinosaur elements in Washington. One would be to end these wars. That would be $1.5 trillion. 2 would be to let the Bush tax cuts for the rich expire. That's another $1 trillion. 3 would be to name his own special advisor on Wall Street reform and start appointing people and doing things within the executive branch. And then 4, just lay down the gauntlet and say, look, folks, I have tried with the Republicans in Congress, hasn't gotten us anywhere. This is going to be the campaign of 2012. Please give me a mandate. Something will happen, because these encampments will fester. The one in Los Angeles is interesting. It's not like New York. In LA, it's right up against City Hall. So you have the beautiful City Hall. The grass is now covered with, by my count yesterday, 250 tents, 500 people. And it's just it's a circle of shame around the center of power. You can't go to City Hall on any business to get your development permit or your tax break or whatever it is you want without passing through these tents of people who are staring at you, who go into the building, who lobby, who go back out to rallies. It's quite serious, and it's amazing that the authorities haven't done anything negative, which is good, but also it's amazing that they've done nothing positive, which is kind of proves the point.
Tom Hayden, I always thank every guest. That was particularly, I think, extraordinarily insightful and useful as we look ahead to where Occupy is going. So I thank you kindly for that and for your time, sir.
Thanks very much, sir. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Wow. And as extraordinary as the first 26 days of Occupy Wall Street have been, there are Occupy movements everywhere. At first we thought the number was 250 cities occupying. Now the estimate is 1,100.